Well, it's been a few days since the appointment of a new Group Chief Executive Officer at the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA. And the new CEO is former eThekwini Municipal Manager Sibusiso Sithole, and he has joined the parastatal on a 12-month contract not long after a new board has also been appointed. Now, these changes are part of Transport Minister Nzimande's attempt to rebuild the rail agency, which faced maladministration and corruption for many years. And the minister, we hope, is going to join us now for a third time lucky. Hopefully this third time's a charm. Minister? Can you hear me there, Minister?
I can't hear you now, Sakina. I don't know why.
That is an absolute pity, but let me just keep speaking there whilst we try and fix this, and hopefully the minister will indicate if he can hear me. Minister, he perhaps try putting in the earpiece. That's perhaps why the minister can't hear me, because I can see that. And while we try and fix that, I just will relate a bit of a story there to you about the Japanese railway agency. Minister, can you hear me? Can you hear me now, Minister?
I can hear you now.
Oh, there we go. Minister, collective applause around South Africa that we finally connected. But I was going to, just relate a little story about the rail agency in Japan when it comes to public service. You know, there was a little town, a little village, and there was one girl in that village that used a train, and they kept that train running to service that one girl, and they made the commitment that they would do that until she completed high school. And when we look at what happens in South Africa, it's unfortunate that we can't say the same, because we hear every day delays of, trains, metro rail, people getting agitated, burning the infrastructure, which of course we do not condone. But, there is a problem at PRASA with regard to the commitment to transporting people, especially the poor.
Now I lost you again, Sakina.
Well, Minister, you yourself, just looking at PRASA and what's been happening, you've lamented the fact that money has gone missing and money has not been spent as well, whereas there are huge challenges with regard to ferrying passengers. So what is your solution at this point coming into this ministry?
Sakina, thank you very much. Of course, the first step that I've taken has been to appoint a board, because the board that was there before had been severely depleted. As the first very important step in trying to stabilize as a basis for turning around PRASA. And I've appointed a group of board members who individually I've got lots of confidence in. People of high ethical standards who I am sure are going to grapple with the challenges that are facing PRASA. As I was saying earlier, one of the things that struck me in my very first week as Minister of Transport just over 3 months ago was the amount of hundreds and hundreds of millions of rands of claims being made by many people against PRASA. I'm sure amongst those there would be legitimate claims for people who are owed. But what I found strange was that in some of these very big claims, there were disagreements from within PRASA. For instance, the legal department would be saying these people never did a job of this amount, or they would say they actually never did a job, so they are not supposed to claim. And then there were also lots of court cases against PRASA, some of which it was very strange, for instance, that the PRASA lawyers would not oppose applications for orders for PRASA to pay. That is why I have said to this new board, your first task, just close down these leakages. We cannot afford this, but investigate properly who is being owed, those legitimately owed, ensure that they are paid, those that are not owed, ensure that we actually do not pay them. So this is, for me, is the basis, because the task, what I've also observed is that when I took over, PRASA seems to have been prioritizing all else except running an efficient rail commuter system. And I've said to the board, that's your core role. Let's stabilize the institution and just get our trains running on time. They carry millions of especially working class commuters, some of whom will lose their jobs or do not get paid on certain days because trains are cancelled or are late.
Minister, the Democratic Alliance have come out, for example, very strongly against the appointment of the new CEO, Mr. Sithole there. And they are saying, amongst others, that number one, he doesn't have the requisite experience in this sector to effect the sort of turnaround strategy that you are aiming to put in place. And also number two, given some of his own challenges, personal challenges with regard to his finances, how can you put him in charge and expect to achieve the sort of integrity that you are talking about now when he evidently could not manage his own finances?
Firstly, Sakina, it's the board that we're looking for an interim CEO. One thing that we had reached an understanding about is that it would be better to appoint an outside person, given the nature of the challenges which I have tried to explain, rather than someone from internal. They looked and actually found a person, and it's an interim appointment. Of course, they've got to come to me as a minister and inform me. Unless I pick up very serious problems, I normally respect the decisions of the board. Firstly, Mr. Sithole has done what is called an initial screening, and he has been cleared. He's not been found corrupt. He has not been found with anything. What I object to very strongly, Sakina, I need to repeat this. Being indebted is not a crime. It's not being corrupt. You know, I always say this, people think that I'm just taking things too far. How many black South Africans under apartheid have not been in a credit bureau? I've been in a credit bureau a couple of times myself. It means I shouldn't be sitting here in front of you. And also, when this thing was investigated, Mr. Sithole's financial problem was like 3-4 years ago, and all those things are sorted out. So I said to the board, you telling me this is the person who have identified, let's give him a chance. Also, let me explain this other thing, Sakina. If we are going to be looking for CEOs all the time who are coming from that sector, I can tell you we'll never have CEOs. In fact, the majority of the CEOs today that we have do not come from that sector. Take SAA. The person comes from Vodacom. It's a new area, but what we need in a CEO are management skills and ability to inspire the teams that work with them, that have got specialists to be able to achieve the objectives that are required. People can't keep on changing the goalposts, you know. Sometimes we get accused of circulating the same people that get appointed all the time into boards and into CEOs. So we want to identify people with potential. That's how I'm going to be approaching, for instance, these state-owned entities that are under my department.
Minister, we're going to leave it there for this morning. Minister also raising questions about what's happening at the Road Accident Fund, for example, and apologies that we couldn't get into all of that. But we will probably invite him to come through to studio next week. But we're going to go to Vela now for the